that actually leads to the next topic, which is cleanup as leaves
Cleanup.
fall and off trees and shrubs. Why is cleanup important? Yeah, I will start with that question. I have a few more.
So cleanup in the fall is important. It all of these pieces of organic matter that collect on the ground and under trees and shrubs, yeah, as they decompose and as they create these layers on the ground, it is the perfect place for disease and fungus and pests and rodents to overwinter. And so if you leave that debris on the ground, you are far more likely to have problems with those types of issues either over the winter or come spring. If you imagine in the case of a fungus that there was a spore that landed on this one leaf and this one leaf is on the ground underneath your peach tree, then in the spring, that spore could reinfect that peach tree with whatever that fungus was. If that leaf has been picked up and disposed of or composted way over there away from that tree, you are far less likely to have that issue. You are simply reducing the amount of pathogen that is in the area of that tree. You also want to make sure that the decaying matter, just like mulch, is not packed up against any root, any trunk tissue, because you can have issues with trunk rot if it stays too wet over the winter. So it is definitely important to clean it up. It doesn't mean that that stuff has to go straight into a garbage and out of your yard. If you choose to compost it, that's up to you. Yeah. It's great material for composting, but the point is that it shouldn't be in the garden. It should be out of the garden.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a question, and a debate I see a lot in the different gardening groups is, you know, in nature, no one goes and rakes up the forest floors. You know, it's true. They don't. And there's a whole microbiome system in the forest that exists for a reason and creates life and food and nutrients in that way. But I don't know I might know of your yard. I don't know. There's probably a yard in Utah, but there's not many that are designed to be forests. And so they have different types of cultivars and different types of flora and fauna and all the things that don't benefit from those microorganisms breaking down in your garden. But there's a lot of nutrients in leaves, and there's a lot of nutrients. So as you were saying, compost them, absolutely. Just don't let them sit and rot on your beautiful, expensive landscape.
Especially if you know you had a problem with something this season. By cleaning up, you're reducing the likelihood you'll have that same problem next season. If you've never had a problem, it's one thing. It's more of just a preventive measure, but this is specifically addressing disease problems.
And you don't know what's blown into your yard on a windy day from your neighbor 3 streets over. So,
right.
Cool, thank you. So that actually leads me to 2 more questions. Well, I'll probably have more questions, but for this immediate moment, I know in September, because it was so hot, we were recommending a lot of people not spraying for pests or disease, but now it's cooling down, but leaves are falling off and pests are dying or going away. I don't know. What type of stuff, just in general, not specific to any one thing, but is there anything for October you're like, now is the time to XYZ?
So, as we were just talking about, if you know that you have had an issue with certain types of diseases like fungal infections, powdery mildew, if you've had, I don't know, mites, if you've had something like On pear trees, sometimes there's a type of mite that's called pear leaf blister mite. Just a couple of examples. But if you've had those things, then the later part of the fall, like October, is one of the perfect, and in some cases the only time that it's appropriate to treat for those diseases. So examples of products that you might be using at this time of year would be like oils if you need to smother any insects or fungal spores, or if you use a copper spray. Copper is kind of like nature's Lysol. It's sort of a disinfectant. And if you spray bare branches with copper, you can reduce the instance of disease. It is possible for copper to turn leaves black. So part of the reason you wait for this time of year is that your leaves are going to be dropping anyway. So it's okay if they turn black, or you should just wait until they're off the tree and spray the bare branches. Little side note, copper, if you spray it, it can discolor your clothing. So just be really careful if you are going to spray it that you don't wear clothes you care about. But yeah, this can be a very effective time of year to treat for diseases and insects, weeds as well. This is a fantastic time of year to address weed concerns. So consider pre and post emergence for this time of year. You can really reduce the number of your weeds in your yard if you treat them at this time of year.
Thank you. And then another thing related to leaves falling off, one of the things that we were kind of chatting about when we were making the notes for the class is that on some trees, it's normal for the dead leaves to stay on.
It is.
So is there just, I mean, I know this is probably a little early in the year for some of that concern, but just so people have this awareness in mind, are there a couple varieties that you can share that do that so we know?
Yeah, here's your fancy vocabulary word. It's marcescence.
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 If you can spell that without looking it up, I will give you a candy bar. Not you, because I know you know.
So, marcescence is common on trees like oak trees, plane trees, which a lot of people call sycamores. There are a few other things. Some of the shrubs, privet is an example that is considered semi-evergreen. Privet will often hang on to its leaves for most of the winter and then drop a lot of them early spring. But in cases like that, it is completely normal for those leaves to stay on the tree and be 100% dead, but they are still on the tree until the leaves start to push again in the spring. So, just a couple examples there, but if you're concerned about it, if your leaves are still on your tree and you're certain they should have come off, there might be something else going on.
And I think another one is like the lace leaf maples. Some varieties do, some varieties don't. I know my mother's, she has like 3 in her front yard, and one of them, the leaves don't fall off. And every year she freaks out, and I'm like, Mom, every year we tell you this is normal. And she's like, well, the other 2 fell off. I'm like, yes, I know.
Yeah.
So I love my mom. Hi, Mom, if you're watching. It's just very cute. I think it's very cute. But, do ask us. We're happy to help because it does vary. Like there's so many, I'm sure a few that are like weird, quirky ones like maples because most of them do, but 1 or 2 might not.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then the other, I guess we kind of hit actually most of the topics here. The only other thing, I know we briefly touched on iron fall feeding. So specifically for October, what would you recommend in October?
So in October, I absolutely would recommend Root Stimulator. Root Stimulator is low nitrogen, so you're not going to be, it's a fertilizer with a rooting hormone in it. So I'll kind of go through the different pieces of it and what makes it important. So as a fertilizer, it's low nitrogen, so you're not pushing a lot of top growth at that time of year, but it's a higher phosphorus content, and phosphorus is what the trees and shrubs need for pushing roots. And that's really beneficial at this time of year to help augment the already happening root growth. And you're just giving it plenty of the nutrient that it needs in order to develop that root system. And the rooting hormone that's in it can push that root growth even more. So I highly recommend Root Stimulator, and Root Stimulator can be used, primarily it's used on new plantings, but it can be used on existing plantings as well. So if you have other things in your yard and you want to fertilize them, Root Stimulator is a great product to use for that. And other types of things that you would use would be like chelated iron. Iron is good to apply at this time of year. Trees and shrubs, even though they are working on becoming dormant, they are still taking up water and nutrients. And so if you sort of imagine like a bear going in for hibernation for the winter, and it eats and eats and eats and eats all summer, trying to build up its fat reserves so that it can sleep all winter and come out in the spring ready to go again. That's kind of what trees and shrubs are doing. They're stockpiling a lot of the nutrients that they need. And if you give these lighter fertilizers and iron and maybe some of the other nutrients that your trees might be deficient in, you are helping them to make it through the winter in a healthy fashion so that they are more likely to emerge successfully, vigorously come spring. So light fertilizers, nothing with super high nitrogen, because that's the wrong nutrient in the fall. They do need nitrogen, but low or slow. You don't want a high number for your first number on any kind of nutrient analysis. The first number is always nitrogen, and you should not have that be very high.